Good morning, everybody. Did everybody grab their notes when they walked through the door? We're going to be taking notes today.
No.
Never mind.
Okay.
Anyway, so today we're going to be learning a little bit about the world around us, some seen and some unseen things. So we're going to be taking some notes today. We're going to have a couple videos to introduce you to the topics, and then we are also going to have an experiment today. So it'll be a good day today. So let's get started.
Okay.
What's going on in our world? We'll take a little quick peek right now. Get this started. Can everybody hear it okay?
Yep.
When we think of nature, we usually think of living things such as plants and animals. The biotic components of an ecosystem include all the living things in an area. This is a monarch butterfly, and this is a tiger swallowtail butterfly. You decide, why are these butterflies different from each other? These butterflies are members of two different species. A species consists of a group of organisms which can successfully reproduce among themselves. Members of the same species possess similar characteristics. They often appear and behave similarly, like these Canada geese. A group of the same species in the same area is called a population. For example, the water lilies in this pond make up a water lily population, and the geese in this field make up a population, as do the turtles in this pond. Rarely in nature is a single population of organisms the only population in a place. For example, in this wetland located in the Florida Everglades, there are populations of alligators, anhingas, fish, and water lilies, to name just a few. All these different populations of living things make up a community. A community consists of all the living organisms in an area. Ecologists often categorize areas by natural communities. A natural community consists of all of the plants and animals interacting with their environment. The definition of a natural community is similar to that of an ecosystem, but the size of an ecosystem is variable, from as small as a tidal pool to as large as an entire mountain range. Ecologists tend to refer to natural communities in more localized areas, such as hillsides, swamps, or forests. For example, this community is referred to as a hemlock forest. It's called that because hemlocks are the dominant tree, although many other plants and animals are found here.
Okay, so that gave us a good little introduction about what we're going to be learning today, and I'm going to highlight a few of the key terms that you're going to need to know and remember. So, broad overview here, what is an ecosystem? An ecosystem is a group of living things and their environment. So there are a lot of different factors working together in an ecosystem. And we're going to go over a few of the parts that work together and how they work together. So a few different factors that make up an ecosystem. We have abiotic factors. These are some non-living parts of an ecosystem. So these are things that influence an ecosystem, but they're not like animals walking around or fish swimming in the water. So these are things like the air around, could be like pollution or however clear the air is, sunlight, the soil that the plants are growing in, the water that keeps everything hydrated, and different minerals that can be found in the air, the soil, or the water. And these are all things that are needed and support the ecosystem. And they also determine which living things can be supported by an ecosystem. So for example, a wolf needs a certain type of, wolf needs meat, and wolf can't be feeding on grass, so it needs an ecosystem that can support its appetite and its need for food. Biotic factors, these are living parts of the ecosystem, and like in the video it said what different species are, different species of butterflies, of turtles, and these are all the living things that reside together within the ecosystem. So species are a group of living organisms, similar individuals, so they get the image of the monarch butterfly versus, I'm not sure what the other butterfly was, but they're both butterflies, but they're just different. They're not the same. They're from different families, if you will. And all of the species that make up this ecosystem, they are part of the population. So I guess you could say, our human population, this could include, our cats and dogs, our pets at home. They all contribute to the population. And then they all survive together in an ecosystem. And all the different populations make up a community. And so, can anybody give me an example of an ecosystem? Like one, it could be something local, it could be something far away. Yes?
Like coral reef?
Yes, that would be a good
fish.
example. Yeah, anybody else? I have, behind my house, I've got a little creek that runs, and that's kind of in a way its own ecosystem. You guys might have something similar near your homes. We have the tide pools. We have the tide pools out in La Jolla. Maybe some of you have been there. Different things, and like the video was saying, ecosystems can be small, big ecosystems can be like if you have a fish tank at home, or ecosystems can be large, like it could be a whole forest that works together and is part of an ecosystem. So very good example, thank you. And here are a few pictures that we got. We have a coral reef right here, good job. We have a desert, there's a lot of, and each of these have very different animals that are in them. Very different species that are in them. Like we have fish and coral reef, that's alive too, that's a biotic factor. Pond, we got frogs, we got different grasses, and then in the desert, there's other different types of animals. Usually there are a lot of reptiles there, and a lot of different types of plants in each of these ecosystems. And then we have another video here for you. Let's get this up there. Don't worry guys, we're about halfway through. We'll get to the experiment soon.
Are you familiar with the word symbiosis? It's a fancy term for a partnership between two different species, such as bees and flowers. In a symbiosis, both species depend on each other. I want to tell you about a remarkable symbiosis between a little bird, the Clark's nutcracker, and a big tree, the whitebark pine. Whitebark grow in the mountains of Wyoming, Montana, and other western states. They have huge canopies and lots of needles, which provide cover and shelter for other plants and animals. And whitebark feed the forest. Their cones are packed with protein. Squirrels gnaw the cones from the upper branches so they fall to the ground and then race down to bury them in piles or middens. But they don't get to keep all of them. Grizzlies and black bears love finding middens. But there's more to a symbiosis than one species feeding another. In the case of the Clark's nutcracker, this bird gives back. While gathering its seeds, it also replants the trees. Here's how it works. Using her powerful beak, a nutcracker picks apart a cone in a treetop, pulling out the seeds. She can store up to 80 of them in a pouch in her throat. Then she flies through the forest, looking for a place to cache the seeds, an inch under the soil, in piles of up to 8 seeds. Nutcrackers can gather up to 90,000 seeds in the autumn, which they return for in the winter and spring. And these birds are smart. They remember where all those seeds are. They even use landmarks on the landscape, trees, stumps, rocks, to triangulate to caches buried deep under the snow. What they don't go back and get, those seeds become whitebark. This symbiosis is so important to both species that they've changed or evolved to suit each other. Nutcrackers have developed long, tough beaks for extracting seeds from cones, And whitebark's branches all sweep upwards, with the cones at the very ends, so they can offer them to the nutcrackers as they fly by. That's a symbiosis. Two species cooperating to help each other for the benefit of all.
Okay, so we're going to highlight a few key terms that we found in that video here. So there's a lot of different roles in an ecosystem. So two different types of roles in an ecosystem are producers and consumers. And there's also decomposers too, but we're going to highlight on the producers and consumers. So producers are living things that use energy to make food. Producers, they feed themselves and they feed other species within the ecosystem. So pretty much, I would say almost the only producer are plants. So plants absorb sunlight, which is what type of factor in an ecosystem? An abiotic factor in an ecosystem is what sunlight is. So sunlight, water, minerals, soil, etc. Those were all abiotic factors that we learned on the previous, or one of the previous slides. So plants have photosynthesis. We talked about that a couple units ago. And then plants, they feed herbivores. So we're going to talk about what an herbivore is in a minute. Consumers, they can't make their own food. They need somebody to feed it. They need to hunt something. They need to graze on something. So they eat other producers or other consumers. And there are three types of consumers: herbivores, carnivores, and omnivores. Now, this might be something that you guys already know. Maybe if you watch like Jurassic Park or something. Does anybody know what?
Animals that eat plants.
Yes. So alternatively, do you know what a carnivore is?
Animals that eat meat.
Yes, so animals, they eat other animals, other living things. And then omnivore is one that eats both. Can we think of an example of any of these? What are we? Humans. What are we? Which category do we fall into?
Omnivores.
Very good. Please raise your hand next time. But very good answer. Yes, we are omnivores. An example of an herbivore. Anybody? Yes, thank you. Good job raising your hand.
Cows.
Yes, cows are an herbivore. Yes, cows graze. They eat grasses. Very good. Let's see here. And here are just some picture examples of different herbivores and omnivores and carnivores. A bear would be a good example of a carnivore. And then here are some examples of two producers. So algae is a producer also. I know algae is not always considered a plant, but algae does produce and it does contribute to the environment. And of course we have regular plants or any other sort of plant. So now we are just about ready for our experiment. Does anybody have any questions about what we learned? And we are going to review some of this before we leave class today, but I'd like us to kind of get out there and kind of observe a few things. It can be fun. We'll get out of our seats and such. So everybody's going to come up and grab a string and a golf tee. And what you're going to do is, you're going to break up into groups of 2 to 4, so 2, 3, or 4 people. We're going to break up into groups, and then you're going to, just one of you is going to grab a string and a golf tee. And what we're going to do is we're going to go out in the quad, and this is going to be guiding what your ecosystem is. So all the surrounding area, you're going to plant your golf tee, and you're going to observe everything in the surrounding area of your golf tee. And you can designate roles. Somebody's going to hold the strings, somebody's going to be pointing out what they're looking at, and then somebody can take notes too. I did put a little section in your notes for you to break down your observations. So only one of you needs to do that, but you can copy your notes for later if you want them. So we're going to go outside probably for about 15 minutes or so, and go ahead and find your spot. Try to spread out a little bit. We'll be in the quad, and yeah, so we're going to go make some observations, and then we're going to come back here. We're going to talk about our observations, and then we're also going to talk about a paper, short paper, don't worry, just talking about different ecosystems and, how we affect our ecosystems and what positive impact we can make, what negative impact we make. And yeah, any questions about this experiment before we go outside? All right, everybody pair up or get into groups and then come up here and get your string and your golf tee, okay? And then we'll all leave it together.